Hey, I never thought I'd be posting on here, but life has a funny way of throwing curveballs. My name is Tom, and I'm here because my world has been turned upside down. I need some advice or maybe just a place to vent. I'm 35, and my wife Emily is 33. We've been married for 8 years, together for 10. What I'm about to share is still fresh, so bear with me. Emily and I met in college. She was the life of the party. Funny, outgoing, always the center of attention. I was drawn to her like a moth to a flame. We had a whirlwind romance, got married right after graduation, and settled into what I thought was a happy, stable life. We both had decent jobs, me in IT and Emily in marketing. No kids, just our dog, Max. For the most part, our marriage was good. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but we always managed to work things out. Or so I thought. Looking back, I guess there were signs that things weren't as perfect as I believed, but I was too wrapped up in my own world to see them. Emily's job required her to travel a lot, which I used to think was a blessing in disguise. It gave us both some space and made the time we spent together feel more special. The first hint of trouble came about 6 months ago. Emily started getting distant. She was on her phone all the time, and when I asked her about it, she brushed it off, saying it was work-related. I didn't think much of it at first. Then she began working late more frequently, claiming she had deadlines and projects that needed her attention. Again, I didn't question it. I trusted her. We've always been open and honest with each other, or at least I thought we were. Things took a darker turn about a month ago. Emily's behavior became more erratic. She was irritable, snapping at me over the smallest things. Our sex life, which had never been a problem, dwindled to almost nothing. When I tried to initiate, she would come up with excuses. She was tired, stressed, not feeling well. I was confused and hurt, but I tried to be understanding. I told myself that it was just a rough patch and we'd get through it. Then came the night that shattered my world. Emily had gone out with some friends from work. At least that's what she told me. I decided to surprise her by cleaning up the house and cooking her favorite meal. I wanted to show her that I cared, that I was still invested in our marriage. I was halfway through preparing dinner when I got a text from a mutual friend, Sarah. It was a picture of Emily at a bar, but she wasn't with her work friends. She was wrapped around some guy looking very cozy. My heart sank. I confronted Emily that night when she came home. She was tipsy, giggly, and completely unprepared for what was about to go down. I showed her the picture, and her expression changed instantly. She went from drunk and carefree to defensive and angry in a heartbeat. She accused me of spying on her, invading her privacy. The argument escalated quickly, with Emily throwing out excuse after excuse. He was just a friend. It was harmless fun. I was being paranoid. The confrontation was a blur of shouting and tears. I demanded to know the truth, but Emily kept lying, trying to twist the story to make herself look like the victim. She accused me of being controlling and overreacting. I was devastated, but a part of me still wanted to believe her. I didn't want to accept that the woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, could betray me like this. In the days that followed, things only got worse. Emily became more secretive, more hostile. I started noticing other red flags, suspicious phone calls, late-night texts, and an unfamiliar cologne on her clothes. I felt like I was living in a nightmare, but I couldn't bring myself to wake up. That's when I made the decision to dig deeper. I needed to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I started paying closer attention to Emily's behavior, tracking her movements, and checking her phone when she wasn't looking. What I found confirmed my worst fears. But I'll save that for the next post. This is already too much to process. Thanks for reading, and any advice would be appreciated. I feel like I'm losing my mind. After my confrontation with Emily, I knew I had to get to the bottom of things. I was a mess, barely eating, barely sleeping. My mind was constantly racing, replaying every moment, every interaction. I couldn't believe this was happening to me, but I had to know the truth. So, I started investigating. I know it sounds sneaky, but at that point I felt like I had no other choice. Emily had already proven she wasn't going to be honest with me. I began by checking her phone whenever I got the chance. She had a password, but I had seen her enter it enough times to know what it was. The first time I went through her phone, I felt a mix of guilt and fear. I didn't want to find anything, but a part of me knew I would. Sure enough, there were dozens of messages from a guy named Brad. They were all saved under the name Beth from work. But it didn't take a genius to figure out what was going on. The messages started off innocently enough. Work-related chatter, jokes, small talk. But as I scrolled further back, they got more intimate. They talked about meeting up, about how much they missed each other. There were pictures too, ones I wish I could unsee. Selfies, a couple of them in bed together, and one of Emily wearing lingerie I had never seen before. My heart sank. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. But the worst part was the realization that this had been going on for months. Brad wasn't just a fling. He was someone Emily had been seeing regularly, lying to me every step of the way. The betrayal cut deep. I didn't confront Emily right away. I wanted to gather more evidence to be sure I had everything I needed. I checked our shared computer, finding more emails and messages. It was all there in black and white. Every lie, every deceitful act. She even had a secret email account she used to communicate with him. It was like she had a whole other life I knew nothing about. One night, while Emily was out working late, I decided to follow her. I felt like a stalker, but I had to see for myself. She went to a restaurant downtown where she met up with Brad. They were all over each other, completely oblivious to the world around them. It was like a dagger to my heart. I snapped a few pictures as proof, my hands shaking with anger and pain. When Emily came home that night, I didn't say anything. I needed time to process, to figure out what to do next. I spent the night on the couch, unable to sleep, my mind racing with thoughts of betrayal and heartbreak. I knew I couldn't live like this, but I wasn't ready to confront her again. Not yet. The next few days were torture. I went through the motions at work, but my mind was elsewhere. I avoided Emily as much as possible, which wasn't hard since she was either working late or glued to her phone. I knew I couldn't keep this up forever. I had to confront her, to get the truth out in the open. Finally, the opportunity came. It was a Saturday, and Emily was home for once. I told her we needed to talk, and she could sense the seriousness in my voice. We sat down in the living room and I laid it all out. I told her what I had found, her messages, her secret email, the pictures. I even showed her the photos I took of her and Brad at the restaurant. At first, she denied everything, trying to play it off as a misunderstanding, but the evidence was overwhelming, and she eventually broke down. She admitted to the affair, saying it started as a harmless flirtation and escalated from there. She said she felt neglected and unappreciated, that Brad made her feel special in ways I hadn't. It was like a slap in the face. I had always tried to be a good husband, to support her in every way I could. Hearing her say those things hurt more than I can put into words. We argued for hours, going around in circles. Emily kept making excuses, trying to justify her actions. She said she never meant for it to go this far, that she still loved me and wanted to make things right. But I could see through her lies. She was only sorry because she got caught. I was shattered, torn between anger and sadness. I didn't know what to do, but one thing was clear. I couldn't stay in this marriage as it was. The trust was broken, and I didn't know if it could ever be repaired. After Emily admitted to the affair, our house turned into a battlefield. Every conversation was a potential argument. She tried to explain herself, but every word felt like another twist of the knife. She claimed she felt lonely and neglected because of my work, saying Brad was just someone who filled the void. That excuse just felt hollow to me, especially when I considered all the times I had tried to connect with her, only to be met with indifference or irritation. One night after another heated argument, I decided I needed some space. I packed a bag and went to stay with my best friend, Mike. Mike and I had been friends since high school, and he was one of the few people I could trust completely. When I told him everything, he was as shocked as I was. He offered me a place to stay as long as I needed and a shoulder to cry on. It was a relief to get away from the constant tension at home, but it didn't make the pain any less real. Over the next few days, Emily bombarded me with calls and texts. She apologized repeatedly, promising she would end things with Brad and do whatever it took to fix our marriage. She even suggested we go to counseling. Part of me wanted to believe her, to hold on to the hope that we could work things out. But another part of me was filled with rage and resentment. How could she do this to us? To me, I decided to meet with Emily one last time to discuss our future. We met at a quiet park, hoping the neutral ground would help us talk calmly. When I saw her, she looked miserable, dark circles under her eyes, her usual confidence replaced by a fragile, almost desperate demeanor. It was hard to see her like that, but it didn't erase the betrayal. We talked for hours. She repeated her apologies, explaining again how she felt neglected and unappreciated. She begged me to give her another chance, saying she'd cut all ties with Brad and focus on rebuilding our relationship. She even showed me a message she sent to Brad, breaking things off and telling him never to contact her again. I listened, but my heart was heavy. Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and ours was shattered. I told her I needed time to think, to process everything. She cried, but she understood. We left the park with no clear resolution, just a promise to give each other some space. During this time, I spoke with a therapist. It was something I never thought I'd do, but I needed an objective perspective. Talking to a professional helped me sort through my emotions: anger, betrayal, sadness, and confusion. It was clear that the affair wasn't just a symptom of our problems, but a massive breach of trust that wouldn't be easy to mend. Emily continued to reach out, suggesting we start couples counseling. She seemed genuinely remorseful, but I was still skeptical. I wasn't sure if I could ever look at her the same way again. The memories of her betrayal haunted me, making it hard to consider a future together. Then one day, Emily showed up at Mike's place. I hadn't told her where I was staying, so I was surprised to see her. She looked determined, saying she wanted to fight for our marriage. She handed me a letter, asking me to read it when I was ready. I took it, unsure if it would change anything, but curious about what she had to say. Later that night, I opened the letter. Emily poured her heart out, detailing her regret, her love for me, and her desire to make things right. She acknowledged her mistakes without making excuses, and she promised to do whatever it took to regain my trust. Reading her words, I felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and a glimmer of hope. Despite everything, part of me wanted to believe her, to think that we could rebuild what was broken. But I also knew that it wouldn't be easy. Trust once lost is hard to regain, and the road ahead would be long and difficult. I decided to give it one last shot. I agreed to couples counseling, telling Emily that this was our final chance. If we couldn't make progress, if I couldn't find a way to trust her again, then it would be over. She agreed, promising to put in the work. So that's where we are now, Reddit. Starting couples counseling, trying to pick up the pieces of our shattered marriage. I'm not sure where this road will lead, but I know I need to give it one last try. For my sake and for the sake of the love we once shared. We started seeing a counselor named Dr. Turner. He's a calm, understanding guy who specializes in relationship issues. Our first session was nerve-wracking. Sitting in that office, facing Emily and talking about our problems with a stranger, felt surreal. Dr. Turner asked us to share our sides of the story, to be honest about our feelings and what we hope to achieve through counseling. Emily went first. She admitted her guilt and talked about how lonely and neglected she had felt. She acknowledged that her affair with Brad was a terrible mistake, a desperate attempt to feel wanted and appreciated. She cried as she spoke, and it was clear that she was genuinely remorseful. Hearing her talk about her pain made me feel conflicted. Part of me understood her feelings, but another part was still furious at her betrayal. When it was my turn, I poured out my heart. I talked about how blindsided I felt, how the trust I had in her was shattered. I told Dr. Turner about the sleepless nights, the constant anxiety, and the overwhelming sadness that had taken over my life. Emily listened, tears streaming down her face, and I could see the regret in her eyes. Dr. Turner helped us navigate these difficult conversations. He emphasized the importance of open communication and rebuilding trust. He gave us exercises to do at home, ways to reconnect and start healing the wounds. One of the exercises involved writing letters to each other, expressing our deepest feelings without holding back. It was therapeutic, but also incredibly painful. I spent hours crafting my letter to Emily. I wrote about our early days together, the love and excitement we once shared. I detailed the pain her betrayal caused me, how it felt like a knife to the heart. I also wrote about my fears, whether I could ever trust her again, whether we could ever be truly happy. It was cathartic to put my feelings into words, but it also reopened old wounds. Emily's letter to me was heartfelt and sincere. She apologized again, acknowledging the depth of her betrayal. She wrote about her love for me, how she realized too late what she was throwing away. She promised to do everything in her power to make things right, to prove that she was worthy of my trust. Reading her letter brought tears to my eyes. I could see the genuine remorse and the desire to change, but I still felt hesitant. The counseling sessions continued, and we started making some progress. Emily ended all contact with Brad and focused on repairing our relationship. We had long, difficult conversations about our past, our present, and our future. We worked on being more open with each other, sharing our thoughts and feelings without fear of judgment. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were days when the pain and anger resurfaced, leading to intense arguments. I struggled with trust issues, constantly questioning Emily's actions and intentions. She tried to be patient, understanding that rebuilding trust would take time, but it was hard for both of us. One night, we had a particularly bad fight. I accused her of not being fully committed to fixing our marriage, of still hiding things from me. Emily broke down, insisting that she was doing everything she could. She begged me to give her a chance, to see that she was trying to change. It was a raw, emotional moment, and it made me realize how much we were both hurting. In the midst of all this turmoil, I found solace in small moments. There were times when Emily and I connected, shared a laugh, or had a meaningful conversation. These moments gave me hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to move forward. But the shadow of her betrayal loomed large, and it was hard to shake off the doubts and fears. Dr. Turner encouraged us to take things one day at a time, to celebrate the small victories and learn from the setbacks. He reminded us that healing is a process, and it wouldn't happen overnight. I tried to hold on to his words, to believe that we could come out stronger on the other side. Despite the progress we were making, I couldn't ignore the lingering doubts. Could I ever fully trust Emily again? Could our love withstand the weight of her betrayal? These questions haunted me, and I knew I had to face them head on. So Reddit, that's where I am now, caught between hope and despair, trying to navigate the rocky path of healing and rebuilding. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm determined to give it my best shot. Emily and I have a long way to go, and only time will tell if we can truly mend our broken hearts. After that particularly bad fight, Emily and I decided to take a step back and focus on the basics. We needed to rebuild the foundation of our relationship, starting with trust and communication. Dr. Turner suggested we spend more quality time together, doing things we both enjoy. It was supposed to help us reconnect on a deeper level, beyond the pain and betrayal. We started small. One weekend we decided to take Max, our dog, to the park for a long walk. It was something we used to do often but had fallen by the wayside in recent months. The fresh air and open space helped us relax, and we talked about anything and everything, our jobs, our friends, our dreams. It felt good to have a normal conversation, to feel a sense of connection that had been missing for so long. Another time we cooked dinner together. It was a simple meal, but the act of working side by side in the kitchen brought back memories of happier times. We laughed, we teased each other, and for a little while it felt like we were a team again. These moments were bittersweet, reminding me of what we had lost but also showing me glimpses of what we could have again. In our counseling sessions, Dr. Turner continued to challenge us. He asked us to confront our fears and insecurities head on. For me, it was the fear of being betrayed again, the worry that I would never be able to trust Emily fully. For Emily, it was the fear of losing me, the guilt over her actions, and the anxiety about whether she could ever truly make amends. One particularly challenging session involved writing down our biggest fears and sharing them with each other. It was an emotional exercise, but it brought a lot of clarity. I told Emily how scared I was that every time she was late or on her phone, I would wonder if she was lying to me again. She told me about her fear of never being able to make up for the hurt she caused and how much she wanted to prove her love to me. Hearing each other's deepest fears helped us understand the depth of our wounds and the work we needed to do to heal. It wasn't easy, but it was a step forward. We also started seeing a couples therapist named Dr. Martin, who specialized in infidelity and rebuilding trust. Dr. Martin was more direct than Dr. Turner, pushing us to dig deeper into the issues that led to Emily's affair. She didn't let us shy away from the hard questions. Why did Emily feel so neglected? Why didn't she come to me with her feelings? What could we do to prevent this from happening again? Through these sessions, I realized that while Emily's affair was a huge betrayal, our marriage had been in trouble long before Brad entered the picture. I had been so focused on my work and my own life that I failed to see Emily's growing unhappiness. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but it was necessary for our healing. Emily also had to face some hard truths. She had to confront the fact that her actions had deeply hurt me, and that rebuilding trust would be a long and difficult process. She had to learn to be patient, to give me space when I needed it, and to prove her commitment to our marriage every day. We started implementing Dr. Martin's suggestions. We set aside time each week for a relationship check-in, where we would talk openly about how we were feeling, what was working, and what wasn't. These check-ins were sometimes painful, but they were also incredibly helpful. They forced us to stay honest and accountable to each other. Emily also started seeing a therapist on her own to work through her guilt and to understand why she had turned to someone else instead of coming to me. It was hard for me to accept that she needed someone else's help to deal with our issues, but I knew it was necessary for her healing and ultimately for ours. One night, after a particularly intense therapy session, Emily and I had a long talk. She broke down, apologizing again and again for the pain she had caused. She promised me that she was committed to making things right, that she loved me and wanted to spend the rest of her life proving it. I could see the sincerity in her eyes, the desperation to make amends. For the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. That night, we held each other close, both of us crying. It was a cathartic moment, a release of all the pent-up emotions that had been tearing us apart. In that moment, I realized that despite everything, I still loved Emily. The road to healing would be long and hard, but I wanted to try. I wanted to see if we could rebuild our marriage and come out stronger on the other side. So here we are, Reddit, trying to rebuild, one day at a time. It's not easy, and there are still days when the pain feels fresh and raw. But there are also days when I see glimpses of the love and connection that brought us together in the first place. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm willing to fight for it. It started with a phone call. Emily was in the shower and her phone was on the kitchen counter. I was cooking dinner and the ringtone startled me. I glanced at the screen and saw Brad's name flash up. My heart dropped. We had agreed that she would cut off all contact with Brad, so seeing his name on her phone was like a punch to the gut. I didn't answer the call, but I took a screenshot of the missed call and then went to confront Emily. When she came out of the shower, I showed her the screenshot and demanded an explanation. She looked shocked and quickly tried to explain. Emily said Brad had called her out of the blue and that she had no idea why. She insisted she hadn't spoken to him since she sent the message ending things, but the doubt was already creeping back in. I wanted to believe her, but after everything we'd been through, trust was fragile. I told her she needed to prove it. I asked her to show me her phone records and messages to confirm that she hadn't been in contact with Brad. Emily agreed, saying she had nothing to hide. As she handed me her phone, I could see the fear and sadness in her eyes. I went through her phone meticulously, checking every recent call, text, and social media message. There was no sign of Brad, which was somewhat reassuring. But the missed call gnawed at me. Why would he call her if they hadn't been in touch? I needed answers. We brought this up in our next counseling session with Dr. Turner. He advised us to discuss the incident openly and honestly. Emily reiterated that she had no idea why Brad called and that she hadn't spoken to him since the affair ended. Dr. Turner suggested we focus on the steps we had taken to rebuild trust and not let this setback derail our progress. Despite this, I couldn't shake the feeling of doubt. It was like a shadow over everything we did. The trust we had painstakingly started to rebuild felt more fragile than ever. Emily could sense my unease and tried even harder to prove her commitment to our marriage, but the call had stirred up all my insecurities. A few days later, another blow landed. I received an anonymous message on social media from someone claiming to have information about Emily and Brad. The message was vague but hinted that the affair might not be entirely over. I felt a mix of anger, fear, and helplessness. Who would send such a message, and why? Was it someone trying to stir up trouble, or was there some truth to it? I showed the message to Emily, who looked genuinely shocked and horrified. She swore she had no idea who would send such a message, and that she had been completely honest with me. We agreed to bring it up in our next counseling session. Dr. Martin suggested we take the message seriously but also be cautious. She said it could be someone trying to interfere with our progress or someone with a vendetta. She advised us to focus on our relationship and continue the work we were doing, but she also recommended we keep an eye on things and be open with each other. The next few days were tense. Every time Emily's phone rang, I felt a pang of anxiety. Every time she was late coming home, I wondered if she was seeing Brad. It was exhausting, and I could see it taking a toll on both of us. Emily suggested we take a short trip together, away from all the stress and distractions. She thought it might help us reconnect and focus on our relationship. I was hesitant at first, but eventually agreed. We planned a weekend getaway to a cabin in the mountains, a place we had always loved. The trip was both a blessing and a challenge. Being away from everything helped us relax and enjoy each other's company. We went hiking, cooked meals together, and talked for hours by the fire. There were moments when it felt like we were rediscovering the love that had brought us together. But the doubts were never far away. One night, after a long hike, we sat by the fire and talked about the future. Emily reiterated her commitment to our marriage and her determination to make things right. I wanted to believe her, but the missed call and the anonymous message were like dark clouds hanging over us. I told Emily how I felt, how hard it was to trust her completely after everything that had happened. She listened, tears in her eyes, and promised again that she was committed to our marriage. She asked for my patience and understanding, reminding me that healing takes time. By the end of the trip, I felt a bit more hopeful, but I knew we still had a long way to go. The road to healing is never straight, and setbacks are part of the process. We agreed to keep working with Dr. Turner and Dr. Martin, to keep communicating openly, and to support each other through the ups and downs. After our trip to the mountains, Emily and I returned home with a renewed sense of determination. We both knew the road ahead would be difficult, but we were committed to giving it our all. Our counseling sessions with Dr. Turner and Dr. Martin continued to be intense, but they were also incredibly valuable. We were forced to confront our deepest fears and insecurities, and in doing so, we began to understand each other on a deeper level. One pivotal session with Dr. Turner focused on forgiveness. He explained that forgiveness is not just about absolving the other person, but also about freeing yourself from the burden of resentment. It was a concept that resonated with me, but I struggled to put it into practice. How could I forgive Emily for betraying my trust so profoundly? Emily, too, was grappling with her own issues. She was racked with guilt and shame, and it was clear that she needed to forgive herself as well. Dr. Turner suggested we each write a letter of forgiveness, one to ourselves and one to each other. It was a daunting task, but we both agreed to try. Writing my letter to Emily was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I poured out all my pain, anger, and sadness, but also my love and hope. I acknowledged that while her actions had deeply hurt me, I wanted to move forward and rebuild our marriage. I also wrote a letter to myself, reminding myself that I had done my best, that it was okay to feel hurt, and that healing would take time. When we exchanged letters, it was a deeply emotional moment. Emily's letter to me was filled with remorse and a genuine desire to make amends. Her letter to herself showed her struggle to forgive her own actions and her commitment to change. We cried together, holding each other close, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. The anonymous message about Brad continued to linger in the back of my mind. We decided to investigate further, and with Dr. Martin's help, we contacted a private investigator to get to the bottom of it. It turned out to be a disgruntled former colleague of Emily's who had been let go from their company and was trying to stir up trouble. Knowing the source of the message was a relief, and it helped to alleviate some of the doubts that had been plaguing me. With that behind us, we focused on the future. We continued our relationship check-ins, went on more trips together, and started to rebuild our intimacy. We learned to communicate better, to share our feelings openly and honestly. There were still tough days, but the good days began to outnumber the bad. One evening, after a particularly good day, Emily and I sat down to talk about our future. She asked me if I could see us moving forward, truly rebuilding our marriage. I thought about it for a long time. The pain of her betrayal would always be a part of our story, but I realized that I still loved her deeply. I could see the changes she had made, the effort she was putting in, and I wanted to continue this journey together. I told her that I was willing to fully commit to rebuilding our marriage. We agreed to keep seeing our therapist individually, and as a couple, to continue working on our communication and trust. We also decided to renew our vows, not just as a symbolic gesture, but as a reaffirmation of our commitment to each other and our marriage. The vow renewal was a small, intimate ceremony with just a few close friends and family. Standing there looking into Emily's eyes, I felt a mixture of emotions: love, hope, and a sense of closure. We recited our vows, promising to support each other, to communicate openly, and to never take our relationship for granted again. It was a beautiful, healing moment. In the weeks and months that followed, we continued to grow stronger together. The trust, while still fragile, began to rebuild brick by brick. We learned to appreciate the small moments, to celebrate our progress, and to be patient with each other's imperfections. Reflecting on this journey, I've learned that healing from betrayal is a long and difficult process. It requires honesty, commitment, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths. But it is possible to rebuild, to find a new kind of strength and connection. So here I am, Reddit, on the other side of a long, painful journey. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm hopeful. I'm grateful for the support and advice I've received from all of you. If there's one piece of advice I can offer to anyone going through something similar, it's this: take it one day at a time. Be honest with yourself and your partner, and don't be afraid to seek help. Healing is possible, and love can endure even the darkest times. Thank you for listening and for being there for me. This community has been a source of strength and support, and I'm truly grateful. The end.
Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions in the comments.